Hello and a very warm welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Sanam Shantier. The road to recovery. The bloodshed may be over in Gaza, but the battle for reconstruction is only just beginning. Breaking the silence. I'll be speaking to Avner Gvaryahu, a former Israeli soldier and today a man on a mission to expose the realities of everyday life in the occupied Palestinian territories. Plus, France opens a probe into the personal wealth of Riyad Salameh, that's Lebanon's longtime central bank chief, who's been accused of money laundering. Now we start with the latest conflict between Hamas and Israel, which took some 255 lives on both sides. Now, while the sights and sounds of active combat have stopped, it's far from business as usual for Gaza, and the road to recovery is strewn with obstacles.
Workers at this bedding factory are still cleaning up the debris after it was hit by an Israeli airstrike during May's conflict. In previous rounds of fighting, it avoided being damaged. This time, though, the manager Jawdat Kudari has to rebuild his whole business.
We will not wait the donors, we will not wait anybody to help. Even we have ordered some of the equipment which necessary to restart. We will do our best, we will do all of our efforts to be able to get the machines. But there is no time frame. Sometimes it may happen from first time, sometimes it takes 10 times.
Actually receiving shipments is an uphill battle. The Israeli government can at any moment class a material as dual use, meaning it could be used for military purposes.
If they will follow the list of international dual use, the list of the international dual use, I have no problem. But when it comes to Gaza, any item can easily classified as dual use.
A large amount of construction materials are considered dual use and are tracked closely upon arrival in Gaza. Maher Abu Jiba is the head of one of the biggest importers of steel there. The metal is essential for reconstruction, but is also coveted by the military wing of Hamas. For Israel to let Abu Jiba import it, he must film his entire operation 24/7, and UN inspectors must check the recordings. Any blip can be costly.
When we have problem with electricity, he warning us. Next time he will make the observation. Israeli side, when he saw observation concerning the cameras, he tell us to suspend it also, as a suspicion.
His officers are filmed as well, but Abu Jiba doesn't believe such tight restrictions stop Hamas getting their hands on material.
If the resistance use the material, they can use the material from Egypt, and there is no control. If from Egypt there is no observing, so why we need this mechanism?
Business owners in Gaza say their operations are stifled, and as a result it will take years to repair the damage which was dealt in just a matter of days.
In other news this week, Israel's parliament speaker has scheduled the confidence vote on a new government. Sunday's show of hands would potentially end Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's 12-year rule. That's the longest in the country's history. And it comes after the leader of the opposition, that's Yair Lapid, managed to gather 8 Israeli parties to form what he refers to as, quote, a government of change. Now, this week's guest on Middle East Matters is Avner Gvaryahu, who previously served in Israel's defense forces. He was a sergeant in a sniper's team. Today, he's the executive director of Breaking the Silence, an organization of over 1,000 veteran Israeli soldiers who are blowing the lid of what the IDF has been committing against Palestinians. He joins us from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for being with us, Avner. You're a man on a mission, and your mission is to speak out against the actions of the IDF, as I mentioned, in the occupied territories.
Yeah, that's correct. And thank you for having me, Sunam. I mean, I'm a man on a mission, but I'm a man that is leading an organization of over 1,300 soldiers, men and women who have served in the Israeli Defense Forces. Because of what we did, our actions, what we saw, the violence that we used, the way that we've experienced the occupation that we were part of, and what it means to control by force millions of people, we decided to speak out, to break our silence, and to bring forward, first and foremost, to our public, to our society, the realities of the occupation. But we also understand that the reality of 54 years of military control over another people is not only an internal Israeli issue, but an issue that is extremely important to put on the table of the world, and to make sure that as the 54th year of the Israeli occupation is starting, we will do whatever we can to make sure that the 55th year will be the final year, hopefully.
Avner, you just mentioned the violence that you used. Would it be possible to give us maybe one brief example of how Israeli soldiers are, I don't know if this is the right word to use, but indoctrinated? You know, time and again, we've seen images of very young men using violence and force against Palestinians. It's almost unthinkable in a way.
I would say one small example, and there's so many examples of this military rule throughout the years, so many elements in which it affects the lives of millions of Palestinians on a day-to-day level. But something that's extremely personal to me, because I took part in it, is pretty common practice throughout the years and also today of home invasions. I myself was a sergeant of a snipers team, and one of the missions that I carried out was going into Palestinians' homes and using their homes as military posts. And there are different reasons for soldiers to enter homes. It could be for using the home as military posts for snipers or observation points. It could be using the home as a place for soldiers to rest if it's a very big or long operation. But it could also be sort of a random operation of searching and entering into homes. But I think the most important element is, and this is, I think, what motivated me personally to break my silence, was to understand the arbitrariness of it, the fact that the Palestinian family could go to sleep at night, and I think, with COVID, hitting around the world, we understand the importance of the safety of our homes, and understanding that for years out of my life, for 3 years out of my life and 2 years as I served in the occupied territories, my job was to make sure Palestinians will not feel safe in their homes.
I do want to very briefly talk to you about the fact that you just mentioned, there was a point where you personally were carrying out these operations in Palestinian territories. Again, briefly, if you can tell us, how do Palestinians react to you today, knowing what you have committed in the past?
I mean, that's a very good question. And I think that part of my ability to become an activist was actually an interaction with a Palestinian, still as a soldier, who managed to show me his life and his reality. And I think that was very important for me in my journey. But even more important, Palestinians that we work with today, we do a lot of educational work here on the ground, guiding hundreds of tours annually. And it's very important for us that when we speak about our experience, there's also Palestinians who meet us. And there's criticism from Palestinians and sometimes, questions and arguing. But I think that what we're trying to do is not create this coexistence, kumbaya reality, but co-resistance, obviously non-violent co-resistance, and making sure that Israelis and Palestinians could live in this region peacefully and hopefully. But the only way that could happen is by thinking about a future that does not contain 18, 19-year-olds controlling another people by force.
In 30 seconds, if you can, what price have you, Avner, had to pay for breaking the silence?
So there are prices to pay in the Israeli society for speaking out, and the current prime minister and probably the future prime minister have both been part of incitement campaigns against us. But with that said, there are thousands and thousands of Israelis that stand with us and support us. And I think even more important than the price that we paid, we always put it in sort of a larger picture and understand that in the end of the day, the price that we're paying is much smaller than the price of the Palestinians who have to live under our control and our might. And that's why, even with the pressure and even with incitement, we will continue to break our silence.
That's beautifully put. Avner Gvaryahu, thank you so much for sharing your story with us on Middle East Matters. Please don't stop. Thanks again. Now, here in France, prosecutors have opened an investigation into money laundering allegations against Lebanon's central bank chief. Riyad Salameh is also accused of associating with an organized crime group. Now, France 24's Erin Ogunkoye brings us the details.
Once an emblem of monetary stability, Lebanon's former central bank governor, Riyad Salameh, could soon appear before a French court. After a Swiss NGO in April, two French anti-corruption associations also filed a complaint against the Lebanese banker. France's national financial prosecutor is now investigating Salameh for money laundering and associating with a criminal organization.
C'est une affaire transfrontière, c'est une affaire internationale, c'est une méga enquête qui progressivement, par un effet d'arborescence, va ouvrir tous les tiroirs de la mafia qui a mis, comme chacun le sait, le peuple libanais à genoux.
Riyad Salameh isn't the only target of the complaint. Much of his inner circle is also under investigation. The probe is aimed at determining how they amassed their fortunes. For his part, Salameh categorically denies any wrongdoing.
Avant d'être gouverneur en 1993, j'avais un patrimoine de 23 millions de dollars et j'ai montré les documents. Et j'ai dit que j'ai confié ce patrimoine pour qu'il soit géré par des tiers dans lesquels j'ai confiance. C'est pas quand je suis devenu gouverneur que j'ai fait un patrimoine.
Highly respected in the 1990s for his monetary policy, a portion of the Lebanese population now sees Riyad Salameh as one of those responsible for Lebanon's financial crisis, its worst in recent history. Within just a few months, the country's poverty rate spiked from 30 to 50% of the population.
Now, that's it from us on Middle East Matters this week. We'll leave you with some images of two new museums opening at Cairo Airport. If you happen to go through Terminal 2 and 3, it's definitely worth taking a look at this extensive collection spanning from all eras of Egyptian civilization. Thanks for being with us.